His classmates regarded him as a nice person. And yet, when you look at his class photograph with his other classmates surrounding him, there's literally a halo surrounding Edward Boucher. To the right, to the left, to the front, to the back. He is graduating with a degree in physics and math, summa cum laude. He's seated literally by himself in the midst of all of his classmates. After all, his father was a former manservant, and in the 1800s, you didn't matter unless you had money and breeding, and he had none. His classmates sang dirty songs on class day about the dark lady on the green who did things for money. He endured all of this. After graduating from Yale College, he gets up and enrolls in the Yale School of Graduate Studies. Again, concentrating in math and physics. And he earns perhaps what would have been the 5th or 6th degree ever earned in the Western Hemisphere. In physics, again, when half the country couldn't read and write, he had a PhD in physics. What is he to do with it? There were schools teaching physics, granting degrees in physics. Hopkins in Baltimore had a young fledgling graduate school. Harvard, he was not called to Harvard, he was not called to Hopkins, he was not called to Yale. He spent a quarter of a century teaching physics and math and whatever other subjects in science had to be taught in Philadelphia. It's often said that he couldn't get a job. He had a job. He had one of the most difficult jobs in the world, teaching people who looked like me the fundamentals not only of science, but really educating them in ways that we cannot imagine. That school, although it was a high school then with no laboratory, no library, no colleagues who could compete in science, and yet we said he couldn't get a job. He had a job. He couldn't go to Fisk and teach. He couldn't go to Talladega. He couldn't go to Tuskegee. He couldn't go to Hampton and be on the faculty. After all, the faculty was populated by people who did not look like him, even though they were black schools. His classmate, Thistle, was the principal or president of Hampton Institute with an inferior degree. He has a PhD. His classmate, and what we would call an inferior degree, is president. Where is he to go? Well, they fired him. That's where he had to go. And he spent several years teaching in various places, and working at the World's Fair, and so forth and so on. And yet, his achievement cannot be compared with anything that any of us in this room has ever done. He had no time to complain. He had no time to be concerned about what he did not achieve. He did what he wanted to do. He educated himself to be an outstanding scientist, an outstanding teacher, and an outstanding citizen of this country. His portrait hangs not only at Yale, bless you. It hangs in the headquarters of Phi Beta Kappa. After all, he graduated Phi Beta Kappa. Hangs in the headquarters of Phi Beta Kappa. It hangs in the National Academy of Sciences. This is the Edward Boucher who never earned more than $1,500 a year, doing what he wanted to do. And if we could remember to do what we want to do, we would all be so much happier, rather than doing something that somebody else wants us to do. Now, I've talked enough. I see people looking at their watches and everything else. So I'm going to stop here and say, anytime you have a little time on your hands, stroll through the Sterling Library. There are 3 portraits as you go towards what we would call the checkout desk. It looks like the high altar of any cathedral. And look to your left and look to your right, and you will see a portrait of the man who donated the money for the buildings. And if you look on the other side, you will again see a portrait, the architect for the Sterling Library. And if you turn completely around, or if you go up in the elevator to the stacks and come back down, you will be face to face with Edward Boucher. 3 portraits. I don't think Edward Boucher would have given a stamp, to be honest with you. But some of us in this room certainly envy his accomplishments. So if you can do anything at all, try to do what you really want to do. Follow your intellectual bliss. And it works. It works in profound ways. Now with that, I'm going to shut up.